Hello and welcome back to Retfurb. So on today's video we're going to get straight into it with this Amstrad SM104. It's got various issues, so we're just going to quickly go around and just check everything and you can see what the problems are before we get started. So straight away you can see just how noisy the buttons are. There's quite a lot of banging and popping noises when they're operated, so these will all need cleaning.
It's a bit outlandish to claim they didn't have a clue, what the media told them. Not necessarily. What's it like though when you're trying to formulate a play? Does it, if you're an opposing manager and you find out a team are going to change formation, and you...
So as you can see from that quick demonstration, there's quite a few issues with this record hi-fi system. A lot of the buttons are, when they're operated, they're really noisy. Hopefully that will just need a good clean. The tape players both work, but one's louder than the other, so there's obviously some issues there. Probably just cleaning the heads, which I'll do. The volume controls, one channel, should I say, is louder than the other. One is quite muffled, so again, I'm going to try cleaning them. Hopefully that's all that is. So now I'm going to get inside, just removing the front fascia panel from the record player. And there's 3 screws either side underneath some small caps, and they need to be removed. And then you can separate the 2 parts of the unit. So these Amstrad systems are not known for their build quality. I mean, I wouldn't say it's overly bad when I was doing it. It seems a little bit rudimental. Some of the ways it are fixed in, the screws, it's sort of like wood screws on the side that's screwed into the metal. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's really bad. I wouldn't say it's great. But as with regards to the sound quality, yeah, they're not known for being that great anyway. But obviously there is some issues with this system. Straight away here, I'm looking at the belt, which is one of the belts that operate the record player. This one moves the arm across, and that one is knackered. It's all stretched. And also I can see someone else has been here at some point looking at this motor. There's black tape wrapped around it, so obviously there's been some sort of issue that someone's tried to rectify, and maybe they did rectify it at some point, but clearly there's issues now. Once I sort of tried moving this spindle part, it wasn't turning, it was locked solid, so I decided to open it up, clean it all out, have a look inside, see what sort of issues there could be. Straight away when I first got in, I couldn't really see anything obvious inside of there, but yeah, obviously there is some sort of issue with that for it to be stuck. And you can see there where I was just trying to pull the spindle out, it was a little bit tight, so I'm just going around first off with a bit of degreaser and just getting rid of any sort of grime and stuff that's on there on the inside, and hopefully that'll rectify it. And just putting it back in, it was a little bit tight again going back in, so I wasn't sure whether this was 100% going to work, but I've sort of carried on, cleaned it off, and you'll see in a minute that I put it all back together. And with this little motor, there is some small little metal tabs that are, you can't really see them in the photo at the moment, but in my right hand, if you look at the screen, the right hand side, that little piece, there's some metal tabs which contact on the inner part of the motor. And I think if they're not in correctly, then it won't operate properly. And you can see there, I'm just putting a tiny little bit of grease on there just to help that spin. And just lining the tabs back up. And then all I do with that is I'm just going to put a small bit of super glue around the edges just to hold that in place. I didn't want to fix it solid straight away in case I needed to take it back apart. There's just a couple of little dabs around here and there just to hold it in a bit of activator. So now I'm just going to put that back in place, and then I can give that another go and just see whether that is spinning now. So temporarily I just had a belt which I had in stock, which I just tried to see if it was okay. And you can see, oddly enough, straight away the turntable turns, but the arm still is not moving. Now, I don't think that was anything to do with what I just did with the motor, but there's a plate on the back on the circuit board which it moves. You can see as I'm spinning this part, you can see that it's moving on the circuit board in the middle. So as it moves where I'm touching now, that operates the spinning of the actual turntable itself, depending on where this is. So obviously it's automatic stop and start. So I'm just checking now that that is working, just checking that when it's in a certain position that the motor is getting a signal or voltage going to it, which it is. So there's no sort of issues there. And I'm also just checking on the circuit board for both of the motors to see whether, again, they're getting power going to them. And you can see they both do get power going there and operating the button. When you press the button on the other side, you can see that it is sending power to that motor, which should then move the arm across. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the wiring for that top motor. And then just take the motor back out again. And now again, when I took it back out, it felt a little bit stiff again. So I'm just sort of looking at the connections there, and I'm just taking it apart again, and now I'm just going over with some fine sandpaper and just cleaning up some of those spindles, because I think this is what's causing it not to turn very well. And also just some of the connections, just giving them a little bit of a clean up as well, which will also help. I'm not entirely sure whether it's these little connections that did it or whether it's the spindles that were still a little bit sticky, but to be honest, I should have done this in the first place. And just making sure inside that those bits are lined up correctly. If you don't have them lined up correctly, this motor will not move. And just making sure they're bent and contacting as they should be. And then putting it all back together again. So the good thing is with these small little motors like this, they're pretty simple, to open up and have a look at and check and clean. So it's always worth doing that before actually replacing the item. So now I'm just going to check the motor's working and operating it. So you can see straight away the motor's spinning now when I press the button. So obviously that rectified it. Like I said, I'm not sure whether it was the actual spindles that were, not moving correctly, or whether it was those connections. I think it's probably those connections, to be honest. I think they weren't connecting correctly, and after a rub down with a little bit of sandpaper, it helped it. So now just going to do a quick demo just to show the turntable is operating. Now at this point, you can see the arms moving, you can see the actual turntable spinning, but the needle was knackered on it, and it wasn't sort of picking up properly on the record. It would just skate across the surface. So even though you can see that it appears to be working okay, all the buttons, the return button, everything like that, the needle wouldn't connect in properly, so that means it just skates on the surface. And now for a new needle to be fitted. So you can see there, it's a specific type of needle to go on this. You do need to be very careful when you're messing around with these needles on this particular unit. I found it, they're very delicate. It doesn't take much. I actually damaged one when I first put it in. I pressed down on top of it, not realising, and it damaged the needle, so I actually had to replace it. So now I'm just doing a quick demo just to show it working. I can't play too much the sound purely because of obviously copyright. So you can see now the turntable is working really well. All the buttons seem to be doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Now you can see I'm just checking the automatic return function and that's all working okay. So no issues. And then the turntable stops spinning. So yeah, all good. So now I'm just going to go back inside and just adjust the speed for the turntable because it was running a slightly slow. And then afterwards I checked that with that app that I've got on my phone and it just showed that it was pretty close to what it should be. Slightly slower than maybe what it would have been ideal, but it was tuned to the highest setting that I could get it, and yeah, it was okay. It was only just slightly out. So now what I'm going to move on to now is getting the buttons out and then cleaning them as best as I can. Now with a lot of push buttons it's quite hard to access the internals, so I'm going to spray the deoxit into them as best as I can and hope that it penetrates it well and cleans and lubricates them, and then they'll be working okay without the popping and banging. Looking at it, I could see there was a few sort of access points to spray it into, so I'm going to be doing that. But also you can see here I'm just pointing out there's some capacitors and they looked a little bit swollen, a little bit furry, so I'm also going to be replacing them at the same time just to make sure that it's working okay. And there's no sort of issues with those. I mean, they could be causing noise as well, so I'm going to remove them first and then I'll clean the buttons after that. Pretty simple job, just unsoldering them and just replacing them like for new capacitors. Now I always get decent branded capacitors when I do anything like this, either Panasonic or I think it's Nichicon, if that's how you pronounce it, something like that anyway. And there's another one that I use which are all pretty good. I've never had any sort of issues with them. I think there was 3 in total that I did, 2 or 3, which I'm just working through now, just sort of speeding that up, just doing the basics and showing the basics of what I did. It's always worth checking around the capacitors, just seeing if there's any leaking, any furry, any swollen ones. It will indicate that they're failing and they need to be replaced. So you can see that I've sprayed the deoxit in there, worked all around the buttons, and that should be all okay now for them. I'm also going to take the power button out. The problem is with this was quite sealed quite well, so again I sprayed it in as best I could. There was a couple of little points that looked like it was going in, so I'm spraying it all in those, and then I can do a quick test in a little while to make sure it is all okay. But I've sprayed it in and worked it around. And also the same with these buttons, the slider buttons for the like equalizer. These also need cleaning, but you've got to remove the outer caps, so I've just been careful prizing them off not to damage any of the front face at the same time. And then I can unscrew the circuit board at the back and then get access to it. And I can spray some deoxit into there and give them a nice clean. These are pretty straightforward, to be honest. You can get access to all the panels really easily and get that cleaner in there. And just working it around. Like I say, on every video that I do, when I use deoxit, if there's any noise, any interference, anything like that, scratchy controls, always go in with the deoxit first and give that a go. It's always worth trying. If it doesn't work, you haven't really lost much. And now I'm just replacing all the belts on the tape decks. This side was a little bit easier than the other side. This side that I'm doing now was a bit more fiddlier. It took me a while to get them in and out. I've done them at this point and screwing it back in, but they do take a little bit of farting around trying to get it in. So now I'm just going to clean the heads. So I'm just using some electrical cleaner, which is just like an isopropanol cleaner, and I'm just carefully going around cleaning all the heads with the end of the tip, and you can see just how dirty that is. So I go over it with that and then also clean it with the clean side. And now back inside, I'm just lubricating the rails for the tone arm. So this will just make it move a lot more easier. Just a slight amount of wet lube on there, not too much that it's going to be dripping, and also greasing the other rail as well, just to help that move. And then we can get the back of the unit put back on. And we're almost getting to the end of doing this and testing it properly to make sure it's all working okay. Again, there's only 3 screws either side of the box and 2 at the back that hold this plate in, and just giving it a good clean over before I fit it up too much more. Now it's time to check that it's all working all okay and make sure that all the functions and there's no noise. The sound will cut out when the music's on due to copyright issues obviously, but yeah, let's give it a go.
Sometimes I think back to my single days and I wonder what.
You can see I'm just checking the record player at the moment. I just muted the music and there's no issues at all. It's all playing okay. It's all returning as it should and there's no issues there. The only thing I would say, which I didn't show, is I replaced the belt also on this turntable. It was slipping a little bit when I checked it at one point, so I replaced that and it's absolutely fine now. You can see here I'm just checking the tape deck. Again, the sound's muted. I don't want any issues with copyright. I've played a little bit of music already on this and I don't want any potential issues on there. So I'm just going through checking it all okay. Everything's working as it should. There's no difference in sound between tape deck 1 and tape deck 2 like there was previously. So I think the heads helped on that, and also obviously replacing the belts, that helped. So just checking all the buttons. There are a couple of the buttons that do sound a little bit noisy when you operate them. Not that bad, a hell of a lot better than what it was, but ever so slightly. Like I say, these Amstrad units weren't known for their build quality, so it could just be that it's the issue. I've cleaned them as best as I can. It's very minor now, like I say, but I just thought I'd mention it. All the tone controls and everything are working okay. So yeah, that's it, all done. I'm pretty happy with it. I think it came out really well. There's no issues like there were previously. I was a little bit concerned about the turntable not working correctly, and obviously that's been solved, which was relatively easy, to be honest. I think, as you saw previously in the video, someone had been in there before and tried to repair it, and maybe they couldn't, or maybe they didn't. It started, messing up again. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. All the buttons were pretty much solved and cleaned with Deoxit, which again, I said it earlier in the video, always worth doing that before you try anything major. Go in and clean the buttons that way. So yeah, really happy with it. It's not my sort of thing really. I know quite a lot of people like it because of the look of it, and it does look quite smart, but the quality of the sound is not great on it, and you can only really use the speakers that come with it. Apparently there's issues if you try to use any sort of external speakers on the system. It just can't handle it and it damages it. So yeah, it's best just to keep the original speakers, and to be honest, they don't come up very often with the original speakers. Most of the time the units are for sale without the speakers. Yeah, it's pretty good that this is all together. So yeah, let me know what you think. I'm happy with the outcome. Leave a comment, let me know, and thanks for taking the time to watch the video as always. It really is appreciated. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.